Yes, under the previous order, there will now be 10 minutes of debate equally divided in the usual form prior to a vote on S.J. Res. 34.
Madam President.
The Majority Whip.
Madam President, I have 7 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate that have been approved by both the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Madam President, speaking of the vote that we'll be having in just a few minutes, for the last several weeks, this chamber has worked very hard to undo harmful rules and regulations that were put forward by the Obama administration at the last moment as he was headed out of the door. These are rules that hurt job creators and stifle economic growth. The FCC privacy rules are just another example of burdensome rules that hurt more than they help, and serve as another example of the government picking winners and losers. They unnecessarily target internet service providers and ultimately make our internet ecosystem less efficient by adding more red tape. The bottom line is that the FCC privacy rules are bad regulations and need to be repealed. I should note that this congressional review action vote will not change the entire online privacy protections consumers currently enjoy, and it does not change statutory privacy protections under the Communications Act. What it does is it repeals something that was done unilaterally by President Obama and his administration, as I said, as they were headed out the door following the ending of his term. I want to thank the junior senator from Arizona, Senator Flake, for his work on this CRA and moving it forward. And with that, Madam President, I urge all of our colleagues to support this resolution of disapproval. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Hawaii.
Thank you, Madam President. Today we are voting on a resolution that will take away privacy protections from the American people. By voting for this resolution, Congress is ignoring the fact that people want more protections online, not less. In 2016, Pew did a study to determine the state of privacy in the United States, and the center found, quote, Americans express a consistent lack of confidence about the security of everyday communication channels and the organizations that control them. They found that this is especially true when it comes to the internet. People no longer trust organizations, public or private, to protect the data that they collect. And today, we are going to make that worse, and that's because broadband providers know our complete browsing history. Think about that for a second. They know everything we do online, everything we search for on a daily basis. And think about how personal that information is, how it paints a picture of who we are. And so it's totally reasonable for broadband providers to have to ask a customer for their consent before they take that information, our browsing history, what we do online, and sell it to a third party. But that will no longer be the case after the Republicans vote for this bill and it's enacted into law. Broadband providers will be able to take your browsing history and sell it without your permission. The FCC spent months on this rule, and by using the CRA to get rid of it, Congress is taking away the FCC's authority to do anything like it ever again. And that will mean there is no federal agency, not the FTC, not the FCC, that even has jurisdiction on the issue of privacy for broadband providers. And so what's the solution here? We should work with the private sector, the FCC, and the FTC to find a comprehensive solution together. At a time when data collection and use is increasing exponentially, Republicans should not be rolling back protections for consumers. This is yet another repeal without replace. 55 years ago this month, President Kennedy gave a seminal speech about consumer rights. He spoke about the march of technology, how it had outpaced old laws and regulations, how fast that progress occurred. That progress is only getting faster, and the next massive technological change will be the Internet of Things, in which we will have tens of billions of devices connected to each other and interacting with us, whether we like it or not. And so as technology marches on, what stays the same is the bedrock principle that President Kennedy outlined, that consumers have a right to be safe, they have a right to be informed, they have a right to choose, and they have a right to be heard. And those rights are in jeopardy. The FCC took a small but important step, but the Republicans are walking it back. And let me be clear, This is the single biggest step backward in online privacy in many years. I urge a no vote, and I yield the floor.
We'll have you ask for the yeas and nays.
Ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
Ask consent to yield back all time.
Without objection. Under the previous order, the clerk will read the title of the joint resolution for the third time.
Calendar number 16, Senate Joint Resolution 34, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5, United States Code of the rules submitted by the Federal Communications Commission and so forth.
Under the previous order, the question occurs on the passage of SJ Resolution 34. The yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Are there any senators in the chamber wishing to vote or change their vote? If not, the yeas are 50, the nays are 48. The joint resolution is passed. The clerk will report the motion to invoke.
Mr. President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we are truly in an historic fight, a fight to protect one of the most treasured and revered of American values, our right to privacy. Make no mistake, our privacy has never been more in danger, and the American public knows it. The American public knows their privacy is in danger when their smart TVs can listen to your most intimate living room conversations, your conversations with your children, with your parents, with your spouse. The American public knows their privacy is in danger when it seems that every day there's a hack on the databases of one of our country's largest companies, Yahoo, Target, Home Depot, JP Morgan Chase. The American public knows their privacy is in danger when the Russian surveillance machine, firing on all cylinders, hacked the United States election, threatening to undermine our sacred democratic system. The American public knows their privacy is in danger when both chambers of Congress hold countless hearings, launch investigations, and receive briefings on the rapidly growing cybersecurity threat to our nation and the impact both on our national security and to the public. The American public wants us to do more to protect their privacy. The American public wants us to do more to protect their sensitive information. Yet, what do the Republicans here in Congress want to do today on the Senate floor? They want to make it easier for Americans' sensitive information to be used, shared, and sold without their permission. The Republicans today are seeking a vote on a Congressional Review Act resolution that would allow Comcast, Verizon, Charter, AT&T, and other broadband companies to take control away from consumers and relentlessly collect and sell their sensitive information without the consent of that family. That sensitive information is about your health, It's about your finances, even your children. They want to track your location and draw a map of where you shop, where you work, where you eat, where your children go to school, and then sell that information. Sell that information to data brokers or anyone else who wants to make a profit off of you. They want to document how many times you search online for heart disease, breast cancer, opioid addiction treatments, AIDS treatment, and then sell that information to your insurance company. They want to know what games your teenagers play or shows they watch so that they can then target ads to your family, and all of this done without your consent. What the Republicans are bringing to the floor here today is going to basically change the definition of ISP from Internet Service Provider. It would then stand for Information Sold for Profit. It will stand for invading subscriber privacy. President Trump himself is outraged when fake violations of his own privacy. But we should all be alarmed by this very real violation of privacy that will occur here today if the Senate decides to roll back these important consumer protections. Here on the Senate floor, the Republicans are fighting to make it easier for your broadband provider to use and sell that same type of information. Remarkably detailed and sensitive dossiers of information about you, your kids, your parents, your grandparents, 320 million Americans. The Republicans are trying to rescind the Federal Communications Commission's broadband privacy rules, which simply require your cable, wireless, and telephone company provider to obtain consumer consent before using or sharing the subscriber's personal information. Promote transparency by disclosing what they collect about Internet and wireless users, and adopt data security protections and notify consumers if a breach occurs. That's it. That's what this whole debate is all about, whether consumers, not the broadband providers, have control over their sensitive information. Now, the big broadband companies and their Republican allies say, we need a light touch regulatory framework to protect Americans' broadband privacy. A light touch approach, like the Federal Trade Commission, which doesn't prescribe actual privacy rules. The Federal Trade Commission only enforces the privacy policies companies create for themselves. And then they bring enforcement action if a company violates their own very low standards. But if Comcast or AT&T or Verizon's policy is, you have no privacy, there's nothing for anyone to enforce. It would be impossible for the Internet service provider to violate their own non-existent or very low privacy protections. Let's be clear here. When the broadband behemoths say light touch, they mean hands off. They mean hands off their ability to monetize captive consumers' sensitive information. Let's be clear. When the big broadband barons and their Republican allies are firing their opening salvo in the war on net neutrality, and they want broadband privacy protections to be the first victim. When Republicans say we need to harmonize regulations, they really mean self-regulation. And self-regulation is the ultimate dream of Republicans beholden to those special interests. They really want to allow broadband companies to write their own privacy rules. Is this really what the American public wants? A harmonized, light-touch approach to protecting their sensitive information from their broadband provider? Does the American public really want us to allow our broadband companies to ignore reasonable data security practices, making consumers' sensitive information more vulnerable to breaches and unauthorized access? Well, this resolution does just that. The Internet service providers even oppose following reasonable data security practices. We should know better The American public wants us to strengthen our privacy protections, not weaken them. The American people do not want their sensitive information collected, used, and sold by any third party, whether that be your broadband provider or a hacker. At its core, this debate is about our values as a people, our values as a society. And while technology has certainly changed, our core values have not changed as a country. For generations, we have valued the right to choose who we let into our home, who we communicate with, who we share our most sensitive secrets with. But now, the Republicans and the broadband industry are telling us that we must forego those rights just because our homes are connected to the internet and our phones are connected to the internet. With many Americans across the country having only a couple of broadband providers at most to choose from, they won't have the option of changing service providers if their privacy protections are not transparent or robust. And throughout it all, while the internet service providers monetize your personal information, the monthly bill will continue to show up for the service that is siphoning off your sensitive information. My colleagues, we know the attack on the free and open internet is coming. Net neutrality is on the chopping block. And this is their first step to ensure the few and the powerful control the internet. We must stop this today. So I urge my colleagues to join with me. The fundamental principle here is that every person should have the knowledge that information is being gathered about their family when they use the internet. 2, that they have notice from the company that that information is going to be resold to a third party, to someone else, not the broadband company. And that 3rd, you have the right to say no, that you don't want that information to be resold about your family member. When we were all younger and the salesman came to the front door and knocked, your mother told you to tell the salesman that they could not come into the house, that the privacy of your family did not warrant allowing a stranger into your home. The broadband companies now say, well, we're in your home and we've wired every room, and we now have the right to take all of the information of your family and sell it. What sites did your children go on to? What sites did you go on to look for help for the disease that someone in your family might have? Now, the broadband companies say, they're coming right through the front door. They're going into every room in your house. And the American people have the right to say what they've always said. No, you cannot take those secrets of our family. You cannot take how we use that information. And so this vote that we're about to take in the next couple of hours out here on the Senate floor goes right to the heart of who we are. And if we hear more about the Russians, we hear more about companies whose information have been hacked, and then the Republicans decide, well, they're crying their crocodile tears about the compromise of the privacy of people in our country, then come out here and take all of the information online in the family and allow it to be sold as a product. And that is just fundamentally wrong. It goes contrary to the values of our country. So I urge very strongly a no vote. And the members of the Senate, this will be a vote that is remembered. This is the privacy vote of all time out here on the Senate floor, of all time, because there's never been anything like the internet going into our homes. No one should be allowed to take all that information and just sell it without getting your permission. Mr. President, I urge a no vote on this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, before he yields the floor, I just want to commend my colleague from Massachusetts for an excellent presentation. He has really outlined the A to Z's with respect to what this issue is all about. I commend him, and I also want to commend the ranking member of the committee, Senator Nelson, our colleague from Florida, for their excellent job. And, Mr. President,